which means on the heels of the previous Torah portion. So it's directly following the previous Torah portion. And the theme about this Torah portion is the cause and effect of following Torah. And as Israel and God's chosen people, we're called to grapple with God's commands and perform them diligently, and obedience to these commands will yield blessings. And it starts by reading, because you are listening to these rulings, keeping and obeying them. Adonai your God will keep with you the covenant and mercy that he swore to your ancestors. He will love you, bless you, and increase your numbers. He will also bless the fruit of your body and the fruit of your ground, your grain, wine, olive oil, and the young of your cattle and sheep, in the land he swore to your ancestors that he would give you. Oh, sorry, it's Deuteronomy 7:12 through 13. So what's going on in the story is Moses is telling the people what needs to happen in order for them to promise in the promised land. Can I get somebody to read Deuteronomy 8:1 through 14?
Testing. There we go. All right, Deuteronomy 8:1 through 14, is that what you said?
Yep.
You shall observe to do all the commandment which I command you this day, but that you may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land which the Lord swore to your fathers. You shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he may humble you to prove you and to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you and allowed you to be hungry and fed you with manna, which you did not know. Neither did your fathers know, that he may make you know that humankind cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God shall humankind live. Your clothing did not grow old on you, neither did your foot swell these 40 years. You shall consider in your heart that as a man chastens his son, so Yahweh your Elohim chastens you. You shall keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Yahweh your Elohim brings you into a good and spacious land, a land of brooks of water, of springs, and underground water flowing into valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land in which you shall eat bread without scarcity, and in which you shall lack nothing, a land which stones are iron, and out of whose hills you may dig copper. You shall eat and be full, and you shall bless Yahweh your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. Beware lest you forget Yahweh your Elohim in not keeping his commandments and his ordinances and his statutes which I command you this day. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built goodly houses and lived in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart will be lifted up, and you forget Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage.
All right, thank you. So if you notice verses 2 through 4, Moses starts by reminding the people how God cared for him. And Moses said that the Lord did this to teach the people not to rely on God alone, that you would obey his commands. And then by not obeying his commands and rulings, that they wouldn't be able to enter the promised land. And then later Moses gives the people warning against pride so they don't fall in the sin of believing that they did this by their own power. All right, switching gears to chapter 10, we can ask the question, what does God require? Deuteronomy 10:12 through 13, so now Israel, what does Adonai your God require of you, but to fear Adonai your God, to walk in all of his ways and love him, and serve Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul, to keep the mitzvot of Adonai and his statutes that I am command you today for your own good. And it's kind of interesting because if you go to Romans 2:28-29, Paul taught that the ritual act of circumcision was actually meant to be an outward sign of internal reality, A commitment to God and loving God in spirit and truth is circumcision of the heart. Remove hard-heartedness, not be stubborn or stiff-necked, and cut away all evil, desire, and greed. Moving on to the half-Torah, which would be Isaiah 49. It's called the half-Torah consolation, and it starts by a lament of Zion. The Lord has forsaken me, my Lord has forgotten me. And in Isaiah 22:26, God responds with his love for Israel. Matt, can I get somebody to read that verse? Isaiah 49:22 through 26. 22 through 26.
The Lord Yahweh says, "Behold, I lift up my hand to the nations and lift up my banner to the peoples. They shall bring your sons in their bosom, and your daughters shall be carried on their shoulders. Kings shall be your foster fathers, and their queens your nursing mothers. They will bow down to you with their faces to the earth and lick the dust of your feet. Then you will know that I am Yahweh, and those who wait for me won't be disappointed. Shall the plunder be taken from the mighty, or the lawless captives be delivered? But Yahweh says, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the plunder retrieved from the fierce. For I will contend with him who contends with you, and I will save your children. I will feed those who oppress you with their own flesh, and they will be drunk on their own blood as with sweet wine. Then all flesh shall know that I, Yahweh, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob."
All right, thank you. I want to pause right there and ask a question. So, what do you think must change in our current culture to counter anti-Semitism? Anybody has an answer for that?
I think one of the things that we can do is use correct language, especially for places in Israel, because it's their land. And we've got to stop saying West Bank and start saying Judea and Samaria.
Right, yeah.
So language is important.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Going on to the Brit Hadashah, which would be Hebrews 11:8 through 12. By trusting, Abraham obeyed, after being called to go out to a place where God would give him a possession. Indeed, he went out without knowing where he was going. By trusting, he lived as a temporary resident in the land of the promise, as if it were not his, staying in his tents with Isaac and Jacob, who were to receive what was promised along with him. For he was looking forward to the city with permanent foundations, of which the architect and builder is God. By trusting, he received potency to father a child, even when he was past the age for it, as was Sarah herself, because he regarded the one who had made the promise as trustworthy. Therefore, this one man, who was virtually dead, fathered descendants. So, the New Testament is speaking to the theme of obedience. And there are 2 points to consider. 1, you obey commands by faith, whether you understand them or not. And 2, we trust in God's commands because of his promise. We saw this with just Jacob, how he had the ability to father a child in his old age.
May I make a comment on verse 4 in the chapter 8? In verse 4 it says that clothing did not wear out. Now, our clothing wears out because the clothing that's made of natural fiber, bacteria consume that fiber. So their clothing was all made of natural fiber. And bacteria were no longer working on it. plus abrasion causes the clothing to wear out. And the third factor is washing the clothing back then was very a process of abusing the clothing, unlike today. So God interrupted 3 natural processes to prevent that from wearing out, including foot swelling. So when you're walking like they did for days, sometimes miles, over rough ground sometimes, in sandals, foot swelling can be caused by hitting a stone or just standing on your feet for hours or some sort of injury. So it's notable that all those factors God interrupted. So the verse is actually pointing to several different types of miracles in one verse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that their feet did not swell up and their clothes did not decay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that in order to test them. What's actually interesting to notice, if we go back to chapter 9, verses 19 to 21, Moses was worried that God was so upset that he would destroy the people. And he was also worried for Aaron, as God was displeased with him, but he prayed for the people and Aaron, and then God listened. I want to pause there and ask another question. Is there a new way we should be think about self-reliance?
Thank you. You in Hebrews 11, the whole verses were about trusting, and then Moshe is concerned. Hebrews. I'm going to go back to Hebrews 10:35 about reliance. So don't throw away that courage of yours, which carries with it such great reward. For you need to hold out, so that by having done what God wills, you may receive what He has promised. For there is so little time. The one coming will indeed come. He will not delay. But the person who is righteous will live his life by trusting. And if he shrinks back, I will not be pleased with him. However, we are not the kind who shrink back and are destroyed. On the contrary, we keep trusting and thus preserve our lives. So if we are going on self-reliance, we will be destroyed.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Does anyone else want to say anything about that?
So just to kind of dovetail on the point about self-reliance, I think when we look at our culture, when we look at specifically the American culture, right, we're all about doing it ourselves. We're all about, we're the people that get it done kind of attitude, whether it's nationally or individually. There's a great temptation to really look at your own works and the fruit of your own works and say, I did that, right? And we often look at the work of our hands and all these accomplishments, and yet we neglect to see the long line of circumstances, people, other things that have come along to get us even to that point to where we can even do what we've done. I think it's really interesting that Moses is kind of, talking to the people like, hey, all these things are happening. All this great stuff is happening to you. All this blessing you're going to receive, but don't think you did this by your own power.
Yeah.
Because you let that pride in.
Right.
And I think that's a lesson for us, even in our culture today. We're not exempt from these things. When we see it in Scripture, The people experience blessing and they forget about God, and
Yeah.
you know, we're not immune to that today.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Man. Okay, in conclusion, I want to go to Genesis 26:5. And it reads, "All this is because Abraham, he did what I had to say and did what I told him to do. He followed my commands, my regulations, and my teachings." So obedience is important because without the laws and commands given by Adonai, we would fall into temptation and sin, we would go our own way, and that would take us further from his blessings. We saw this with David when he dishonored God's commands with Bathsheba, and then later God took that from him. He took his Is there any comments or questions anybody would like to add? Yes.
It's important to note that Abraham was not a robot and was not an unthinking individual. But, for example, when God told him he was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham, realizing that innocent people might be killed, he interceded for the destruction of the cities with God and bargained with him. And so our approach today should not be blind obedience, but thoughtful obedience. And there is a difference.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Little off topic, but yet in the Torah portion. In chapter 8 there, it mentions that when, in verse 12, in verse 10, it says, "And when you have eaten and art full, then ye shall bless Yahweh thy God for the good land which he hath given thee." And I know some have suggested that we should probably pray and bless our food after we've eaten. And I'd like to propose that the context here is in the context of them receiving the promise of the land and how it flowed with milk and honey. And it was in that context when you enter the land and you receive the promise that I gave you, to give thanks. And examples I have from Yeshua in that, he blessed his food before he ate. This is in Matthew 15:36 when he was feeding the multitude with the 7 loaves and the fishes. It says that he gave thanks, broke them, gave to the disciples and to the multitude. And it says that, and then of course we know at the last Passover he had with his disciples, where he broke the bread, gave thanks. So I think if we look at this text in Deuteronomy 8, it's in the context of receiving the promise of the land and the good that is in the land. I don't think it's in the context of every time we have a meal, we wait till we eat and then we give thanks. So that's just a sideline comment.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
And then to piggyback on that, I jumped ahead to Deuteronomy 30. Look, 30:15. Look, I am presenting you today with, on the one hand, life and good, and on the other, death and evil, that I am ordering you today to love Adonai your God, to follow his ways and to obey his mitzvot, regulations, and rulings. For if you do, you will live and increase your numbers, and Adonai your God will bless you in the land you are entering in order to take possession of it. And then it goes down and says, I call on heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have presented you with life and death, the blessing and the curse. So he's calling on the land to be a witness to what he's ordering them to do.
Adding back to the discussion in Deuteronomy, the Father gives us multiple examples of if you follow my commandments, my statutes, and my judgments. So there is an action for us.
Right.
Then there's that blessing, as Lori was just saying. But there's also this blessing that is bringing them into a land with cities they didn't build. We talked about that in our Torah portion last week, that they are getting to take the vineyards that they didn't plant. And then this week, as there we are in Deuteronomy 8, specifically listing out what some of those blessings are when you follow the commandments, statutes, and the judgments. And it's, for the Lord your God brings you into a good and spacious land, a land of brook, of water, of springs and underground water flowing into valleys and hills. They didn't do that. That's what Yahweh provided. A land in which you shall eat bread without scarcity. I jumped. A land of wheat and barley, vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. These are, that land of milk and honey is part of that blessing. And we've seen what happens when you don't walk in the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments. It turns into a desert. Historically, we've seen that. And so I think to watch this play out in real time, and then you talk about the self-reliance, they couldn't have done this on their own, only by following the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments. So bringing that all back around into that blessing when we walk in, but there is an action on our part. There is a responsibility on our part.
Right.
But then it's not of our own strength to achieve these things. Yahweh blesses because of our obedience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Matthew, 6 works so perfectly because it starts out and it says, therefore I say to you, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink, nor your body or what you'll put in onto it. It is not life more than food and body more than clothing. And it goes on. And I just love how that kind of circles back around, even when Yeshua is talking to us to remind us, I have given you everything that you need. You just have to trust me. You have to follow me. Life will have suffering, though. Let's not get that messed up, because the people, when they were wandering around and throughout history, really because of our own fleshly issues, we really have to war against those fleshly desires that are something contrary. But he's saying, just trust me. I will give you every single thing that you need when you just slow down, know that I'm the creator, kind of what everyone else is talking about, and that I will then provide for you everything that you need. So I think that it's this beautiful balance between, even in some of those other verses that you talked about, we do have to die to our fleshly desires daily to understand that he will then provide everything that we need, and then counting it all joy because we can see those beautiful things, the Deuteronomy, and then in Matthew when he's just reminding us of I got you.
Mm-hmm. Anything they want to share? All right, well, it's going to wrap it up for today. I know it's kind of a shorter Torah portion, but thank you all very much for listening. And Shabbat Shalom.